Well, as you all know, we are or have been keeping an eye what's been going on in Northern Ireland, especially what's going on in Stormont. And I've made my views very clear on this. Right now, the DUP, when they are trying to blame everyone else, should be blaming themselves. This is their bed. They made it. They now have to lie in it. They supported Brexit. They were the ones who threw Theresa May under the bus and then were then thrown under the bus themselves by Boris Johnson, who was probably the one driving the bus. But luckily now, it does seem to be that the DUP are seemingly coming to their senses, and it does look like they are now probably, again, fingers crossed, touch wood, all that, hopefully, it does look like they are now finally going to accept their reality and go back into Stormont. Now, I don't think that their agitation against the Windsor Framework is going to end. No means by a long shot. But ultimately, I think they will now try and find new ways to cause trouble. But now the fact that you are probably going to get a functioning government in Northern Ireland is probably going to be really good for everyone who lives in Northern Ireland. Because as we've said before multiple times when we discussed this, the fact that you have not had a functioning government in Northern Ireland when we've gone through a cost of living crisis, when we've gone through an energy crisis, has probably caused a lot more trouble and turmoil for the people living in Northern Ireland than anything else. So at least that is some sort of good news. And when they do finally get back into Stormont, don't worry, we will report on it. But so far, that's the update. They're a little bit closer, we hope. We hope. But, however, does look like that Rishi Sunak's much vaunted Windsor Framework already been going for 2 months and is now causing one of the UK's key export sectors, mainly the food industry, billions of pounds. Billions. Why? Dual labeling. And all this is for expressly Northern Ireland, but not just Northern Ireland as well, for Europe as well. We discussed this, I don't know how many times, the idea of having to print 2 labels and dual labeling is going to cost a company billions, if not millions, depending on their size and how much exporting they do. And you will not be surprised to hear that once again, we have a company that is just going to go, we're just going to give up on EU exports. We're just going to give up. It's too expensive. It's now become too complicated. We're just going to give up. And as we've said numerous times, that is not good. That is not good. How much money is that company actually then giving up by saying it's not going to export to the EU anymore? That could be a significant portion of its business. And remember, when we've covered businesses like this before, it's been in the region of 30 to 40%. So imagine a business losing 30 to 40% of their exports. Pretty extreme. But that's just reality that, we live in, and we warned about the consequences multiple times. But anyway, before we get more, of course, into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one updation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And of course, let's carry on. Let's crack on. So here we have this coming from Politica. The title is Rishi Sunak's Brexit deal is up and running, and it's cataclysmic for UK food exporters. When Rishi Sunak signed his new Brexit deal in February, he boasted that it would deliver smooth flowing trade with the whole United Kingdom. And of course, if you've been following this, it hasn't been anything but smooth. We are, in effect, an idea that Theresa May floated which the Brexiteers shot down. And as you may remember, when all this was going on, we were asking, well, hold on a second, why all of a sudden are you prepared to accept a deal that you were wholly against just 2 years ago? Again, a question that should have been asked to a lot of those ERGers, but unfortunately never was. So, but just 2 months after the Windsor Framework has come into effect, it is having huge unintended consequences for a key export sector, with hundreds of millions of pounds in trade now at risk. This wasn't an unintended consequence. People were predicting this from the start. They were warning about this from the start. So the idea that this was unexpected, don't believe it. It entirely was expected. It was predicted. And yet, of course, you're going to have conservatives going, well, we never predicted this. No, they were told time and time again, if you do this, this is going to have consequences. Of course, they didn't listen. So since October of this year, all meat and some dairy products moving from Great Britain to be sold in Northern Ireland, part of the UK, have to be required to carry a not for EU labels, which is meant to ensure that goods are not moved on into the Republic of Ireland, an EU member country. But the British government is going further. From October of 2024, all meat and dairy products sold right across the UK will also have to include these labels, even if there is no intention of them ever being sent to Northern Ireland. So this was just meant to be for goods going to Northern Ireland. Now, food companies are going to have to spend billions, well, not billions, millions, or well, if you probably sum up the cost, it's going to end up in the billions when you add all those companies together, just to create this labeling problem. This labeling problem has been long since foreseen, long since talked about, but again, no interest because, well, at least we got Brexit done and maybe we can solve the consequences out after. Of course, that was always the plan of Boris Johnson. We'll do this, we'll get Brexit done and then we'll solve and live with the consequences after. Again, hasn't been overly successful. And you want an example? Look at the Rwanda deal. The Rwanda deal is pretty much almost, even though a lot of people wouldn't say it, it is almost a Brexit debate. Really. Anyway. And of course, this requirement will be applied to more UK food products from July of 2025, and it applies whether the food product is in the UK or imported. Brussels says that the plan for a UK-wide rollout will go way beyond Brussels' requirement set out in the Windsor Framework, and crucially could see EU exports plummet because of the costs and inefficiency of doing separate product runs for British and European markets. This isn't new. This is not new. We talked about all the way back in the day, the idea of having two separate product lines was just considered insane, and only big companies could afford to run two separate product lines. And the idea that you have one product line because it's all going into the same market, everyone adapted to that very easily because everyone loved that idea. But no, this is back. We said what a massive problem this was going to be. We said at the end of the day, you're going to get SMEs because ultimately they're the ones who are going to bear the brunt. Your bigger companies, your internationals, they're going to be fine. But your SMEs, they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to have the money to set up another production line just for Europe. It's pointless. But anyway, it continues. Sam Ramsden, the director of the Food and Drink Association and the CEO of food exports business, Ramsden International, described the new system as absolutely cataclysmic for food exporters. Ramsden told Politico that he fears eventually all the products that he supplied with his partner co-op will be labeled not for EU, which means that we cannot export them to the EU. And with large manufacturers may find it easier to comply with these new rules, Ramdam says that the changes could prove just too costly for small operators. Again, we've been saying this time and time and time and time again. And oh, look, it's happening. Anyway, a lot of manufacturers will probably just give up on the European market, he said. It seems an inconsequential thing to say, but to put it into the packaging, but in practice, it means changing production runs. And manufacturers are saying this is crazy because they do not want to start doing additional product runs. Again, what have we said? Right from the very beginning. This was not new. This was not new. The idea that, as the article implies, that this was just an unexpected consequence. No, we've been talking about this since day one, going all the way back to the day when we regularly used to get out Ian Dunt's book that he did about Brexit. Hold on, do I have it down here? I believe I do somewhere. Here we go. All the way back to Ian Dunt's book, got a bit of dust on it because we haven't used it for a while. Brexit, what the hell's happened now? So this was not new. If all the way back then, even someone like Ian Dunt was writing about this, again, it was not a surprise that this happened. So his concerns were also echoed by Bedwin Doot, the Director of Sustainability and Growth at the Food and Drink Federation. He told the British MPs recently that the implementation of these costs and the labelling requirement would run into the hundreds of millions of pounds a year across the industry. Then what did we say? It generates a risks for hundreds of millions, if not billions of pounds worth of exports, he told MPs last month. It is an unnecessary domestic policy. You can have a trade policy that is trying to promote exports on one hand and then just undermine it with a domestic policy on the other. And this is what we have said time and time again about Brexit, that MPs do not understand trade. The current crop of like conservative MPs just do not understand what they're talking about when it comes to trade. The fact that they think they can just, or in the case of Jacob Rees-Mogg, just go, we'll have zero tariffs and somehow that will be fine. They don't understand what they're talking about. Why? Because they're ideologues, and as far as they're concerned, rules, regulations, technically there shouldn't be any. They would rather just go gone. But like I say, they've tried and they've failed so far on that front, luckily. But of course, they're still trying it. Anyway, a spokesperson for the group, which represents food and drink manufacturers, said that the labelling removes the flexibility that was agreed with the EU, and this will result in less choice for shoppers in both Northern Ireland and Great Britain. A more pragmatic approach would be to monitor supplies before taking action and work with the industry to find a practical solution. So again, there is a solution to this, a very good solution to this, and it's rejoining the customs union. But of course, that would mean having to accept, EU rules and regulations, and that is not the worst thing in the world to have to do. Would actually be a massive boost to our economy to do that. So, although the UK-wide labelling requirements do not come in force until October of next year, some manufacturers already appear to be using the labelling system in preparation for the rollout. As a result, Ramdam says that his company is having to do manual checks on everything, take out the labeled products from others and return them to the supplier, and then credit them to the customer to take them off our list. So even more additional paperwork for a company and work a company had to now do because of Brexit. And that's an additional cost they don't have to do. It's just extra cost, extra money. Why bother trading with the EU anymore? But again, you're risking 30 to 40% of your business if you decide to do that. And maybe, hey, all that extra paperwork, all that extra hassle, maybe it's just worth it. But then again, that means your business growth is going to superly be stumped by that because you aren't exporting anymore, and you've only now got the domestic market of the UK to sell to. The UK market in a couple of years is going to become very, very cutthroat, and it's not going to be a good for all these consumers. And then it's going to be very, very hard for any new companies to try and take hold or even root or get in their own home domestic market. Say there was always going to be consequences. So another of these, I love this, unintended consequences, random ones, is that the non-EU consumers will be put off by the not for EU labels. If we export to other markets, what are consumers going to think if they see not for EU on the packaging? They're going to question whether it is safe, he said. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. What if you are exporting to another market and you've got that not for EU label on? That does not make your product look good. So you are going to see, I think a lot of British companies find and really struggle with that they see their sales go down because of this not for sale in the EU. That is going to be something that is going to have significant consequences. He's absolutely right on that. So for Ramsden, the labelling requirement is just the latest in a string of headaches resulting from the UK leaving the EU, which has already seen the company's sales with the bloc plummet from 25 million to 16 as a result of Brexit. Just imagine the loss that companies now have from 25 to 16. That is a significant loss. He says this will finish it all because we are supplied by stock that is in circulation in the UK market. A government spokesperson said the Windsor Framework drastically reduces the paperwork and processes required by the old protocol. We are continuing to engage exclusively with businesses to try and support them in adapting to these new arrangements. Of course, your stock line from the government, everything is okay. The Windsor Framework works. Trust us, it all works. But you have industry professionals here saying, no, this does not work. This is going to cause a big disaster. This is unnecessary. Why are you doing this? What are you doing? You need to work with us. We need to find a practical solution. Are you willing to do that? No, of course they're not. Of course not. Because if they did that, they might have to admit, well, actually, maybe Brexit wasn't a good idea. And this is what I'm hoping again happens in the next Parliament, that we actually get to have good, proper Brexit conversations happen in Parliament and them not turn into these shouting matches. And like I say, fingers crossed, there are going to be a lot of, shall we say, purged Brexiteers in the coming red wave. So hopefully, as we say, fingers crossed. But yeah, again, another quote unintended Brexit consequence. Now, this was entirely foreseen by a lot of experts, all the way back, even in February. Before that, even going all the way back to 2016, talking about what the consequences would be for us leaving the EU. Labeling was a massive issue, constantly talked about. And as you said there, manufacturers, we don't want to do two separate runs. So we'll just slap a sticker on it instead. And then what does that then say if you maybe export that to a different market where it's saying not for sale in the EU? It wouldn't surprise me if you saw a knock-on effect because of that sticker and you saw EU sale, non-EU sales of exports plummet again. That's, again, the reality that we've talked about constantly, and now the government just wants to deny, once again, the reality of the situation that they've created. Same for the Brexiteers as well. You don't see the Brexiteers talking about this either, and I suspect they won't. Because as they will say, oh, well, Brexit really hasn't been finished properly. If only we would do Brexit properly. Yeah. It's the same song and dance we always hear time and time and time again. But anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.